Good evening. I'm political editor Dennis Welch. This is Politics Unplugged, and our top story is the Maricopa County election audit. The ballots were returned to the county, but that doesn't mean it's wrapping up. Video from our AZ family drone shows Maricopa County picking up the nearly 2.1 million ballots from the state fairground groups on Thursday. The ballots and other items in the hands of the auditing firm Cyber Ninja had been in their possession for months. And with me now to discuss the election audit is Maricopa County Board of Supervisor Bill Gates. I want to thank you for joining us. Let's just jump right into this. You started this week out walking into your office, getting the latest subpoena from the state Senate. They want you to show up on Monday. They want you to produce a lot of materials and some more information. What's going to happen on Monday?
Well, we have taken the time, the board, to meet with our attorneys and examine the requests that have been made here. We're going to do that again on Monday, and then at that point we'll make a determination as to whether there are any reasonable requests that we should respond to.
So you're not going to be complying with them on Monday as they are asking of you guys right now?
Well, again, I don't know what the decision is that we'll make as a board, but we will meet again on Monday and make a determination at that time.
They have continually said to you, and complained about the county, saying that you are not cooperating with them. Now you have a different point of view on that. You've handed over a lot of what they have requested, particularly the ballots and whatnot, but you haven't handed over the routers. Could you explain to our viewers why you won't be handing over those routers that they are requesting, that they say they need to complete this audit?
Right. Well, first of all, they don't need the routers to complete the audit. The issue in question there is whether the machines at Maricopa County were connected to the internet. We have provided them with all the information, different logs, for them to make a determination as to whether the machines were connected to the internet, and they were not connected to the internet. Furthermore, we will not be turning over those routers because those routers essentially provide a blueprint for Maricopa County's information technology. And if we were to turn that over and it got into the wrong hands, and who knows where these documents and other materials are going to, if they got that into the wrong hands, it could actually put sensitive law enforcement activities and personnel in danger.
And you guys are going to be reviewing this on Monday, whether to comply with any part of this audit. What reason is there right now that this would change from the previous subpoenas? Is there anything that you see in the subpoena that you could see the county handing over?
Well, I think it's going to depend upon, we're examining the previous subpoenas, what's different, what's the same. And again, if there are materials that are, public records that we haven't provided already, because frankly, a lot of this we provided already. The ballot envelopes, we already provided it to them. So I don't know if it's lost somewhere in Montana. But the reality is, if there's things that we haven't turned over that can be provided reasonably, we'll do that.
All right, and we're going to get into this more deeply here in the next segment, but this week too, we did learn about some of the groups that are funding this audit. They're related or somehow connected to some Stop the Steal groups. What was your thought when that information came out? What was your thinking?
I've always been very concerned, right? This is supposed to be a public, Senate-driven endeavor, but it's not, okay? As we learned this week, there's almost $6 million coming from not public funds, but from outside groups. And we now know that these outside groups are groups headed by people like, the head of Overstock.com, Mike Lindell, all these types of people who have a specific agenda. They've already decided, they believe that the election was stolen from Donald Trump. So to have those people funding it, it is naive to think that they don't want to have an impact on what's found in this audit in some fashion.
Were you surprised? Because I've talked to some folks over at the county that said, this is kind of what they suspected all along. Were you surprised with any of the names, any of the groups connected to this?
No, I wasn't surprised with it. Because again, let's take the House, for example. In the State House, Speaker Bowers took the time to figure out what had happened at Maricopa County and decided not to proceed with this. So this is a specific group, the GOP caucus in the state Senate, certain members of that wanted to achieve goals of people from the outside. That's what this has been about from the beginning. This hasn't been about instilling confidence in the voters, but instead in raising questions. And unfortunately, it continues to tear at the foundations of our democracy.
And another big development this week, too, with that audit was, the Senate liaison, Ken Bennett. It looked like he was resigning, then he wasn't resigning, and then, back and forth. What do you think that says? What's the message you took away from that, watching that kind of piece of the drama play out this week?
Well, I would say this drama with Ken Bennett, and then the fact that members of the Senate GOP caucus are tending to peel away and are now opposing this audit, this shows to me that this is crumbling. And I think to direct attention away from that, that's why they've issued another subpoena to us. They want to make it about Maricopa County, but the reality is that we've cooperated with them. We told them we would cooperate with reasonable, credible auditors, but that's not who they brought on board. So I think they're very concerned about the direction of this, and so they're trying to put the attention back on us, but that's not where it should be.
And we're running out of time now, but I do want to ask you about some of the threats. You talked about that in the past related to this audit, that you had been threatened, other people on the board have been threatened. Are you still getting threats right now, or has it died down a little bit, or has it increased?
Well, I would say, unfortunately, all you have to do is go on my Twitter and the Twitter of my colleagues. We continue to see this going on. Again, this is why this whole process is so problematic, right? It's whipping people up. They're making us out to be, people involved in corruption or rigging the election in some way. And all we've done, and all the good people of the Maricopa County Elections Department has done, is do our jobs. We need to get the focus off of that, and we need to figure out the best way to run the 2022 election. Maricopa County continues to have that responsibility, and so we're looking for direction from the state and others, but we've got to go do an election, and we've got to move on from the distractions of the Arizona audit, unfortunately.
All right, I want to thank you very much. It's Bill Gates, County Supervisor here. Thank you very much for
your
your time and joining us here today. But still ahead, who is exactly funding this controversial Maricopa County election audit? We now have a better idea of that, and we'll let you know after the break. And back to our top story, the Maricopa County election audit. We have learned some of the supporters, or more supporters, of former President Donald Trump have raised more than $5.7 million for Arizona Republicans' election audit. This is significantly more than the $150,000 of taxpayer money contributed to by the Arizona Senate, which commissioned the audit and hired cyber ninjas to run it. And with me now to discuss this, a panel of reporters, Jim Small with the Arizona Mirror and Julia Shumway with the Arizona Capital Times. I want to start with you, Julia. How many of these groups have donated? Who are they?
So most of these groups they're pretty expected. We'd seen their fundraising pleas throughout the audit. I think the only news that we really got out of this was exactly how much money each of them donated.
And how did this come out? This was released by the cyber ninjas,
Yeah,
correct?
this was released by the election review team. They put this out there. This does come on the heels of a lawsuit that had been filed from a watchdog group that was trying to get this information. A judge had issued a preliminary ruling basically saying this information is public record, and the contract that Cyber Ninjas had with the Senate requires them to turn over any documentation in order to settle a lawsuit. And the judge basically said the Senate would be wise to go to Cyber Ninjas and say, hey, you don't want to be breach of contract, you should turn this over. We don't know exactly what happened. It certainly indicates that might have been what happened behind the scenes. We'll wait and see kind of how that lawsuit resolves itself. There's a lot of other information that was also requested. But I think to Julia's point, I think that this really just kind of highlights exactly how the folks who are paying for this audit are people who already believe and have already been very clear about their belief that the election was rigged, and they're the only ones that are behind paying for this. If the idea here is not about Donald Trump, as Karen Fann has said so many times, well, everyone who's involved with it and everyone who is paying for it sure seems to think that their job is to switch the election results and get Donald Trump put back into becoming president.
Yeah, there was a group there that's being headed by someone who calls themselves a reporter that has been covering this story down here for another, I guess you could say, a far-right news channel. What is her group and how much did they raise?
So that was Christina Bob and her group is Voices and Votes. She insists it has nothing to do with her employment at One America News Network. However, she also ends many of her newscasts by telling people where to go to donate money, which, as I'm sure people watching this would know, real journalists would not do. And they raised not too big of a portion. They contributed about 300 to 600,000 of this total amount of almost $6 million.
Yeah, and the top donor to this, who are they, and what's the big names connected with them? Because there are some big names. Yeah, top donor to this is a group that was started by Patrick Byrne, who is the former CEO of Overstock.com and has been a very loyal Trump ally. He was involved in meetings after the election with other folks who were involved in the fundraising here, and folks like Mike Flynn and Sidney Powell, in trying to, with the president, in basically trying to get him to overturn the election, trying to get him to seize ballots and seize election machines and stuff like that across the country. These are folks, again, who have made no bones since November that they can't accept the fact that Donald Trump lost, and that they're willing to go out and spread stories and work to try to overturn the election. Any idea how much the cyber ninjas have made off this? $5.7 million. No, I mean, it's tough to say. I mean, I think that's one of the things, though, that was requested. That is some of those records, I think, that are still outstanding and still part of that litigation, is exactly how was this money used and who was it spent? How was it spent? And I think another thing that we're not going to find out through any of that, but that is important to remember, is that all of these nonprofit groups that were raising money all took a cut before they sent money to the audit. So Christina Bob's entity, Patrick Byrne's entity, all those people that run that, the way nonprofits work, is they're going to take a portion of that and keep it for administrative costs. And whether that's 5%, whether that's 50%, we really don't know. And we do know that Karen Fann recently told us in the Senate during that briefing, or whatever you want to call it, a couple of weeks ago, that she believes this could be a new industry, and it seems like it's going to be a pretty lucrative industry moving forward. But I want to kind of move on to some other drama that played out this week, and that is the Senate liaison, Ken Bennett. We alluded to it earlier with Supervisor Bill Gates. If we could go a little bit deeper into that. Now, where did this all start? Now, my understanding is, Mr. Bennett had given away some details on some box counts or some ballot counts to some observers. Cyber ninjas weren't happy with that, so they basically blocked them from entering the facility where they were counting ballots. Right. So Mr. Bennett has been fairly open, which the cyber ninjas were not big fans of. He will answer press questions. He'll share information with observers. And after this happened, there was an incident a couple weeks ago where he was going to try to answer some questions from the pool reporter there that day, and a security guard told him he wasn't allowed, that he wasn't the spokesman. Mr. Bennett did it anyway. He gave out some more information, and after that he was barred from the facility, at which point he said, well, if I'm not allowed to go into the facility, I'm not your liaison anymore. And obviously that's changed over the past week. Why would Karen Fann work? It seemed like she had to work to convince him to stay on at this point. I mean, somebody says they're going to leave, like, why not just let him leave? Why would she want to keep him on board? Well, I think it's important to have Ken Bennett. He is really the only person who lends kind of the patina of expertise and election knowledge to this whole thing. If you look at it, I mean, the companies that were hired to do this have minimal, if any, election experience. And the experience they do have is, frankly, in trying to get election results thrown out and overturned. And Ken Bennett, as a former Secretary of State, has been the state's elections chief, right? So he's overseen kind of the totality of elections in Arizona, the totality of Arizona election law. He's never run an election. That's not the job of the Secretary of State. That's the job of county elections officials. But he has way more knowledge of election administration and election oversight than certainly anybody else in that building. And I'm just going to ask you guys to maybe guess a little bit here, and I don't have an answer, and I get the question all the time when people are talking about the audit. Any idea when this might wrap up? Because we're still waiting for a report. We've still got subpoenas to go through. Any clue, guesstimate, this wraps up? I think our last Senate briefing that President Fann and Senator Peterson did made it pretty clear that it's not going to wrap up for a while. At that point, it looked like the audit was close to ending. Instead, they turned around and issued a number of additional subpoenas. It may add months on to this time. It's possible this drags into 2022. Jim? Oh, yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think we're going to see litigation. I mean, I know Supervisor Gates earlier was a little kind of demurred on your question about that, but we're going to see litigation on that, either from the Senate or from the county or from both, and from Dominion, frankly, the voting company, the company that made the machines that are in question. I'd be stunned if they comply with this subpoena. All right, I want to thank you both here for joining us here today. That is all the time we have for this segment, but coming up next, President Trump holds his first rally in Arizona since losing the election in November. Our panel joining us after the break with what the Trump rally tells us about the direction of the Republican Party and the cycle ahead. That's next on Politics Unplugged.
And I to people. I tell it to Republicans, and a lot of them are very good people, and they say, well, sir, we have to get on to the future. Let me tell you, you're not going to have a future. First of all, our nation is being destroyed, but you're not going to have a future in 22 or 24 if you don't find out how they cheated with hundreds of thousands and even millions of votes, because you won't win anything.
And that's a clip of former President Trump's visit to Arizona just over a week ago. The former president continued to push claims that the election was stolen. Those are false claims, by the way, but so far there's been no evidence of widespread voter fraud. The former president hailed several Republican state senators in their role in moving the Arizona Senate's audit in Maricopa County forward. He has also touched on immigration and the border wall. President Trump was joined on the stage by other Republicans, including former news anchor Kari Lake, who is running for governor.
I am a proud conservative and an unapologetic Trump Republican.
And Kari Lake was met with cheers and applause, but it was a different story for Senator Michelle Ugenti-Rita, who is running for Secretary of State. She was booed off the stage.
Sir, why don't you listen to what I have to say?
Ugenti-Rita had supported the election audit, but she posted a tweet saying she's no longer supporting that Trump audit because she called it botched. So what does this all really tell us about the Republican Party and next year's election cycle overall? With me to discuss this is our political panel of consultants, Republican Barrett Marson and Democrat Tony Connie. And I want to kind of start with you. You're the resident Republican here, but we do have to disclose you're working for a political PAC that is supporting Matt Salmon. So you've got that going on. But what did you take away, just the overall appearance from that rally? How big of an influence will Trump be, and his endorsement in this race, potentially in a primary, is that enough to help somebody win this?
You know, for the last 5 years, certainly, Trump has pretty much owned the Republican Party. His endorsement is gold, though I will note, just this past week, or just last week, you saw in Texas a special election to replace a congressman who had died in office, and Trump's anointed person did not win. So I thought that was a little interesting. But I still, in Arizona and across the country, to get a Trump endorsement is still gold.
And what was your takeaway from watching all that as a Democrat, particularly in the governor's race? You watch that, it seems like Kari Lake has got a lot of momentum. It seems like right now, we're still a year out, a lot can change, but that Kari Lake is kind of that Republican primary right now. It's what everybody is talking about when they talk about that primary race.
Yeah, it looks like she's tapped into this base of Republican voters who will do sort of whatever the president wants them to do. But, you know, I think it's probably a wide open race, but I think she's a pretty formidable person. And especially because you see a lot of sort of work happening behind the scenes to either get people against or for people based on people they've donated before in the past or anything like that. And so I do think that Kari Lake is probably in a really strong position, which is pretty scary, I think.
One thing, and just not in the governor's race, but in every race, you got to remember that while this 5,000 people in that auditorium, you know, are rabid, and there is certainly a significant percentage of Republicans who follow exactly what the former president says. That's not everybody. It's not even a majority. And so you have to really be careful. Remember, Doug Ducey was just reelected 15 points, 14 points, yet he was censured this year by the state Republican Party. Cindy McCain, Jeff Flake, people who are reasonably popular amongst the general population, but not amongst that small cadre of committed base.
And well, Doug Ducey won that election by a wide margin, but that certainly, it was before the pandemic. It was before the 2020 election cycle. That has changed a lot.
He was still very popular with Republicans not that long ago. So, but when you saw a small group of Republicans this year at the state meeting censure him, that is by no way the majority of Republicans feel that way. Same with when John McCain was censured. He still went on to win re-election after re-election after that.
Yeah, and Tony, let's talk a little bit about the Michelle Ugenti-Rita. This is a political consultant. I mean, you saw her get booed off the stage at that meeting. Should she continue running, or should she, is her candidacy dead, or can she overcome that?
I don't know. I can't predict things in the Republican primary anymore. I have no idea. I mean, I do think, though, that when you look at the way people put so much effort into getting their candidate on that stage and talking, so even though Barrett says they're not the majority, they're obviously the people that are controlling the narrative, they're controlling the Republican Party. I think that they're an extremely important bloc, and the challenge is, how do you win a Republican primary in a way that doesn't make it so you are unable to win a general election? And even, I know you're on the PAC for Matt Salmon, Matt Salmon had spoke in favor of the audit, something which you yourself had said is probably not a great political thing to do because of how unpopular it is. And, and he's doing it because people know on the Republican side that they have to find a path to get Trump to win.
Definitely for Michelle Ugenti, I think she was literally one of the first people who tweeted out that she would be speaking at the rally.
Yeah.
So to go from that high to then really not even being able to speak because you're being drowned out by the boos, I think that had to.
Let's talk a little bit about the politics of that audit. I mean, is it a good thing to run on if you're a Republican support of this audit moving forward?
I think first of all, we got to see the results, right? I mean, the results, which may be questionable, but we at least have to see what the results are. It hasn't been run, certainly in the best way, but audits are good things, generally, right? In business, you always audit. Channel 3 Audit has an audit of its station. Everybody does audits. Audits are good. The way it's been run has been problematic.
And you disagree with that. I mean, do you really think it's going to matter a year from now?
Yeah, I think it's going to matter because the people who are in favor of this audit and the people who are making money off of the audit are going to keep this up and keep going from state to state to state, and then all of a sudden it's back in the news again. It's back on sort of the minds of the sort of activist base of the Republican Party. So I think that this, unfortunately for democracy, is going to be a long sort of a thing that's going to be going on for a while.
Tony and I are actually going to create a company that will seek to raise money for audits across the country. He'll be the president, I'll be the COO. It's going to be a great company.
Well, let me ask you though too, do you think Trump is still going to have the same effect in drawing out Democrats as he did a couple years ago? We did see, his supporters are still very much his supporters. He did fill up a big room during his visit here. But is he going to still have that same effect of motivating Democrats to come out and vote against his candidates or against, some of the things he's saying?
I think people on my side, Democrats, and I think a lot of independents, are very nervous about the direction of, I guess, the Republican Party, of the kinds of things that are happening with these audits and even with, COVID and vaccines. And I think that is going to keep enthusiasm high for Democrats to go out and vote. But yeah, I think that that is a big question. Who's going to vote in this upcoming election? And you know what? The people who do vote, independents, older people, they're not for this thing.
Trump isn't in office. Trump isn't a candidate. He's not on the ballot. He doesn't have Twitter. He doesn't have the impact for Democrats and independents who, were angry for 4 years. I mean, they still obviously dislike him, but they can't be that motivated by him because he's harmless, if you will, for government speaking.
All right, I want to thank you both here for joining me. That's all the time we have here today, but be sure to join us next week for more Politics Unplugged.